Hey, what's up guys, Andrew Guzman here, and today we finally get to our second part of the modifications for the Spirit Halloween Deluxe Ghostbusters Proton Pack. Well, technically we start the modifications in this video, we just continue the video series. For those of you who's been asking for part 2, I do want to apologize to everyone because I had a hectic October, a lot of engagement dinners, weddings, and I have several fall traditions I like to do this time of the year. But at least you could get a head start for next year's Halloween or for your next Comic-Con convention you plan to visit. Before we get started, I'd like to thank my stepfather-in-law, David, who helped me out tremendously in this project. I just want to say thank you, David. Without your help, I would never have tackled this project. Before we begin, I do want to say that it was hard to work and film at the same time. So there's no footage for this video, but there's pictures. So we're going to go back to school. It's going to be a PowerPoint presentation. So with that being said, let's get started for real. Okay, so here I'm going to show you my process of how I modify my Proton Pack, so that way when you guys decide to tackle this project, your Proton Pack is going to look very similar to that in the background. This little section is going to be broken up into 6 parts: prepping the Proton Pack for painting, the exterior modifications, sounds and light, the neutrino wand, the backing for the Proton Pack, and finally the Alice frame. If all goes good, maybe I want to modify something else down the line. Okay, so let me minimize myself here, and there we go. And let's begin. Before I proceed, if I'm not looking at the camera, bear with me because I'm looking at my notes and at my computer screen so I can give you this PowerPoint presentation. The first thing what you're going to do is you're going to take your Proton Pack and you're going to turn it around and unscrew the cardboard backing that's on the back of the Proton Pack. You will have to probably cut through the felt material that's glued onto the cardboard backing to get to the screws. Once you unscrew it, do not throw out the cardboard backing. Once you get to the back of the Proton Pack, gut out everything that you see in there. I'm talking about the wires, the battery pack, the speaker system, and the light system that's originally in the Proton Pack. So that way your Proton Pack would look like this. Also, while you're at it, anything that you can unscrew from the Proton Pack, like some of the red tubings and the green one, and remove the black tubing that's on the Proton Pack, you're best off to remove it because it'll be easier for painting. Whatever you can't remove, just mask it off, and then when you're done painting, remove the taping. Once you've done that, use Glue Gun to remove every sticker that you see on the Proton Pack. I used WD-40, it worked just fine, but Glue Gun will work just as well. Then once you've done that, take your handy Gorilla Glue. Gorilla Glue will be your best friend in this project. And glue on the Duel Injector, the Cyclotron Bumper, and the V-hook that goes onto the Proton Pack. Do not glue the V-hook track onto the neutrino wand because you're going to need to open up the neutrino wand to work on that, so leave that for last. And also glue on about a 1/4 inch PVC pipe about 1 inch thick. Why did I do that? The original Proton Pack has something similar, so I just went along and did it. Scrape and sand off the copyright logo that's on the Proton Pack. I used a flathead screwdriver to scrape off as much as I can. If it gets scratched, it's not a big deal because it's the Proton Pack. It's supposed to get scratched up and banged up and take a beating. For the fake welding, I use hot glue gun. Some people use epoxy, but hot glue gun was available to me and it actually looks pretty decent. You're going to want to hot glue gun the iron arm, the hydrogen gas actuator or the HGA, the booster frame, the end filter, and around the neutrino wand. On the end filter, your Cosmetic kit does come with little white discs that you can just glue on to where it's supposed to be holes. I noticed in Ghostbusters 2, the court scene, when you get a panning shot of the Proton Packs, they have white discs. You can do that, it's up to you. I went ahead and I cut out some holes using a Dremel because maybe I might want to do something cool with that somewhere down the line. Once you've done that, use a scouring pad to scrub up this entire surface so that way the paint has something to grab onto. Then wipe down everything with rubbing alcohol. You may want to use rubber gloves for this one so you don't leave any fingerprints. Now your Proton Pack is ready for spray painting. So take your flat black or matte M-A-T-T-E, black paint, and just go to town. Once the paint dries, if you want to, you could go along with this step. This is optional. I use some graphite powder and I brushed down the entire surface to give it somewhat of a metallic look, and I sealed it with a metallizer sealer. I will link that in the description below. Everything that we already did, you're going to want to do the same thing to the neutrino one. So you're going to have to open it up, gut out everything, and get it ready for spray paint. And if you wanted to use the graphite powder, go for it. Now that everything is dry or drying up, take this time to paint the brass knobs. Actually brass, they kind of look gold, but paint it brass. And some of the silver bits, paint the silver. Also paint the shock mount, the resistor, and the crank knob silver as well. Once you're done with that, attach all the wires and the tubes back onto the Proton Pack. Okay, now we go on to the exterior modifications to the Proton Pack. What you're going to want to add on is the iron rod. You may want to cut the iron rod because it is a little long, so cut it to size and then use the extra piece and glue it onto the top of the Proton Pack, right in front of that brass knob. You want to replace the blue tube with the yellow tube that comes with your Cosmetic kit. Speaking of that brass knob, you might want to drill a hole on that knob and insert the blue tube because it goes inside the knob and not the Proton Pack. Replace the ribbon cable and secure it down with the ribbon clamp. And you also going to want to replace the 2 screws and use bolts to screw down that silver covering. Also, you want to add a silver bolt at the top of the booster frame. You want to add the blue tube that you remove and replace it with the yellow tube, and you want to use that and put it on the Duel injector. You're going to want to replace the white cyclotron disc and put the red coverings so that way it looks movie accurate. You're going to want to add a screw onto the middle of the shock mount. You want to add a red strip around the end filter. Again, if you want to add the white disc onto the end filter holes, that's your call. And you're going to want to cover up the green tube with the black tube covering and zip tie it to one of the red tubes. Now let's move on to sound and lights. Okay, let's tackle the cyclotron lights. When you get your Cosmetic kit, you have to break off the 2 green chips so that way you could connect the little red cups onto the cyclotron. Make sure you follow the pattern of the lights, otherwise it's going to look, instead of going around in a square, it's going to go in an X form. We don't want that. It should look just as so, and then you connect the wires in the appropriate location. For the blue power cell light, the blue disc comes covered in a paper covering. Just peel it off gently and then put it where it's supposed to go, and then secure it by putting those red brackets right on top of the blue disc, and then place the chip right on top of that and screw it down. Now let's move on to the speaker. Where you're supposed to put the speaker, underneath it there's some kind of wall. You're going to want to try to drill like about a 1-inch hole so at least the sound can travel, otherwise the sound will be trapped in that location, and we don't want that. We want the sound to travel. Once you've done that, the speaker system comes with little wood pieces that you have to glue on, so that way it gives the speaker a little lift from the Proton Pack. Once you've done that, you glue down the speaker system onto the Proton Pack and take the chip that it comes with and screw it down right underneath the speaker. Run the red and black wire right to the back of the speaker so that way the speaker is connected. For the volume knob, what I did is I drilled a hole next to the resistor so that way it kind of looks like a piece that would belong there, and that way you can control the volume, how loud you want it or how quiet you want it. Once you've done that, glue it on with, you guessed it, Gorilla Glue, and then connect it onto the chip. Now for the battery. There are 3 little ridges inside the Proton Pack you're going to have to shave down so that way the battery can lie flush. Once you've done that, use Gorilla Glue to glue it down and hold it in place. I first tried using hot glue gun. It lasted only for like 3 days and then the battery pack fell off, so I had no choice but to use Gorilla Glue. This little wall right here, cut a piece of it off so that way the wire connecting to the battery pack can lay flush and not bend, because as time goes on, when wires bend, they stop working. We don't want that. And while you're at it, glue that wire down so that way it won't move. I drilled a hole on the other side of the Proton Pack so that way it'll be easier to connect, so that way you don't have to open up the Proton Pack just to connect and charge the battery. We cut a hole and we glued it on so that way it's flush, and then whenever the Proton Pack needs to be charged, we charge it. It was a clever idea on my stepfather-in-law. Next we're going to move on to the neutrino wand. This part is a little more detailed, but I'm going to try to move a little quickly. I will link all the files in the description below that has greater detail for all the modifications. First thing you're going to want to do, you're going to want to drill holes on the wand where all the lights and toggle switches will go. Inside the wand, remove everything that will be in the way of the wand chip, such as this. Assemble the graph bezel and insert it where it's supposed to go, which is right here. It took me a little while because it's so tiny, so take your time with it. Also, when you're cutting to insert the bezel, make sure it fits snugly, otherwise it will be loose and we don't want it popping off. Once you've done that, screw on the vent light reflector. Then insert the LED covers in the appropriate locations. Then insert the wand chip with the toggle switches. Insert the bulbs in its appropriate locations. The white and black wire goes in the white section, the orange and black goes in the orange section, and the yellow and black wire goes in the yellow section, as indicated in the photo. Now let's move on to the wand tube. Remove the plastic white tube and the bulbs that come originally with the neutrino wand. You're not going to need it, so get rid of it. And you're going to want to cut off this part and this part from the neutrino wand. Insert the new bulb onto the gray LED holder, like so. Then insert the LED holder with the bulb onto the clear tube. You may want to use a really tiny flathead screwdriver to move the wires because the wires sometimes they get in the way. So take your time with it. Align the tube with the mounting holes so they lay flat onto the wand. Then connect the wires onto the wand chip. Now let's move on to the intensify button. You're going to want to remove the top fake switch. I used a razor blade. It came off pretty easy. And then you're going to want to drill a hole. I'd say about 3/16 of an inch. Once you've done that, drill a hole inside the wall so that way you can run the wires that will go right into the chip. Then secure the intensify button with all the mechanical parts it comes with your kit, and then screw the wand back together and insert the gray back ring onto the clear tube. Insert the gray triggering ring and secure with the set screw, then screw on the brass banjos, then insert the red tube. Once you've finally done all that, Gorilla Glue the V-hook track onto the neutrino wand. Then run all the wires from the neutrino wand through the black tubing that you glue back onto the neutrino wand, and then you screw the other end onto the proton pack, and then run the wires and then connect all those wires onto the chip inside the proton pack. It should look like this. Now let's move on to make the backing for the proton pack. What you're going to want to do, you're going to probably want to go to your local Lowe's or Home Depot and pick up a 2 feet by 2 feet MDF board about 1/4 of an inch thick. I wouldn't do an 1/8 of an inch only because I think that's too thin, so 1/4 of an inch should be enough. Remember that cardboard backing I told you not to throw away? Use that and make a template so that way you can cut out something a little more sturdy. Leave about an extra 1/2 inch wide because I've noticed in the proton packs that they're not flush, that there's a little space on the proton pack, so give it about maybe a 1/2 inch. Once you cut out the board, spray paint both sides a flat black or a matte black. Once it dries, you're going to want to have to eyeball where the battery switch, the battery life indicator, and the speaker system are located on the proton pack. Once you get a good idea where everything is located, you're going to want to drill some holes so that way the sound can travel outside and everyone can hear how awesome your proton pack sounds. And then you're going to want to cut out a square so that way you can access the battery, and you're going to want to cut out a very tiny rectangle so that way you can see how much life your battery pack has. Once you've done that, you can buy longer screws and just screw it down onto the proton pack. Me, I went the extra mile and I used the leftover MDF board and I created this shape. So that way I can screw that down and then I can screw on the backing onto the proton pack without using longer screws. We're almost done. Now let's move on to mounting it onto the Alice frame. Go to your local military surplus store or go online and try to pick up an Alice frame. I'll leave a link of where I got mine in the description below. Also, you may want to pick up a 2x3 lumber and cut it to about maybe 8.5 inches. And then you're going to want to screw that down first onto the backing of the Proton Pack. Then take your Alice frame and put it on top. Make sure you have a good location of where you're going to want to screw it down. And then once you've done that, screw it down onto the lumber that you just screwed on. My stepfather-in-law had little pieces of wood lying around, so he used that and he screwed it onto the middle of the Alice frame, so that way it kind of gives it an angle when you put on the Proton Pack. Well, there you have it. You finally build your very own Spirit Halloween Deluxe Ghostbusters Proton Pack. It takes a lot of work, but trust me, it's well worth it, especially if you want an awesome Proton Pack, just like this one. Any questions you have regarding this project, please feel free to leave your comments below, and I promise I will answer them. Also, leave a time marker so I know exactly what you're talking about. Hopefully, all this was very helpful for all you guys that are watching this video. Again, thank you guys. I will leave the PDF files in the description below, so that way when you're doing your modification, it goes into even greater detail. In the next video, I'm going to show you an overall look of my cosplay and maybe show you tips on how to achieve certain things without spending so much money. Until then, I'm Andrew Guzman. Have a good one. Thanks again for checking out the long-awaited part 2 of this video series. I had a hectic October and I couldn't get it out in time for Halloween, so I do apologize. Check out my previous video over here and check out all the supplies you're going to need to tackle this project. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel and hit that bell icon to be notified for new content. Thanks everyone. Peace.